Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. This is Dan Zeli, president of the PMI Calumet chapter, and welcome to the May 2021 chapter meeting. So we just enjoyed a nice virtual networking happy hour discussion with our friend all across the region, both in the greater Fort Wayne area, and also the South Chicago suburbs here in the Calumet region. So just quick announcements here. We got a couple announcements. Go over some job opportunities, or we'll open the floor to anyone who's got any potential job opportunities at their places of business. Maybe one business item, and then we'll get on to our featured speaker, introduced by tonight, our Vice President of Professional Development, Karen Teeter. So let's see, hit the right button. Love technology. Come on, here we go. So let's start off with our welcome on our new members. So we have Robin Camper Kirk is joining us now. She joined in early May. Welcome, Robin. She's been a member of PMI since 2011, and she is a principal consultant for RCK Consulting over in nearby Olympia Fields, out there in your neck of the woods, Karen. She has well over 20 plus years of great project experience. A lot of good stuff in ERP software integration, and other digital transformation and change management skills as well. So if you're interested to find out more, since we're all meeting virtually, otherwise I'd say, hey, everybody, meet Robin and probably buy her a drink. But unfortunately, you'll have to check out her skills on LinkedIn. So welcome, Robin. Also, hey, just a nice quick shout out to our renewing members. As you can see, there's about 11 or 12 of them right there. Big screen. It's always pleasant for our members to renew, so we can have a thriving chapter. Thriving chapters give you great professional development offerings like this one tonight. And let's go into our chapter announcements. So first of all, Neil Magsambol, if I hopefully didn't butcher his name too bad, but Neil's going to be our speaker next month, and his topic is called Be Formless, Be Shapeless, Be Agile, and that's scheduled for Wednesday, June 16th, starting at the usual 5:30 for networking and 6 o'clock for our program. Hopefully by then we'll have an update on whether the board elects and we get our proposal for doing a disciplined agile Scrum Master course and certification, which we're awaiting a written proposal from Jonathan Lee. So more information on that. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to our Vice President of Professional Development, Karen Teeter.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much. Welcome everybody to tonight's chapter meeting. I am thrilled to be able to introduce Adam, who I consider not only a mentor, but a personal friend. Adam has been gaining experience for the last 20 years in a wide variety of industries: hospitality, education, which is where I had met him through the education arena, as well as the energy industry, which is going to be driving his conversation this evening. He's held a variety of roles within the industry: training, teaching, compliance, and operations. He's currently a leader for NiSource in the gas control department and across multiple states. He is a visiting professor for DeVry University. He holds a plethora of degrees and certifications, which makes him, not only have a great, we always talk about the technical background, but also the emotional skills that are so important. And so I'm just really pleased. I got to see a preview of his presentation, and I know we're in for really a great treat this evening. So Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start sharing my presentation here. quick confirmation that you could see my intro slide here, right? First slide.
Yes, we can.
You can hear me okay, obviously. That's great. Thank you for the introduction, Karen. You, stole some of the things I was going to say about myself. I like to hear myself talk, as my wife would definitely attest to. But no, I appreciate the introduction. And thank you for helping me have this opportunity to present to the rest of the members here. And thanks, Dan, for helping me along the way and advocating for me to be here to present tonight. I appreciate the opportunity again. And the topic, as you probably know from the promotional that went out, as well as any of the invitations to register, is around project selection for regulated utilities, really looking at drivers in industry of energy. And we're not going to dive super deep into almost anything, but I do want to provide some examples here as we go through at a high level on the driver side as well as risk side. So some of the things that we'll cover, I was going to do a brief introduction. I'll keep it super brief, go into the purpose that I propose for this presentation, talk about some of the project drivers and development of projects in the energy industry, specifically for gas pipelines. I will provide a more detailed example of gas control, which is kind of where I reside. And we'll dive into a little bit of risk management and then kind of reconnect at the end on some of the Project Management Institute framework from the PMBOK. So, just to add a little bit to what Karen said about what I have done and what I do, I'll really just kind of focus on what I do now. So it gives you a frame of mind of where I've come from in the energy industry. And I've really been with NiSource for about 8 years now. And I worked on the electric side, doing training compliance work for the electric system operators, the folks who run the electric grid for a subsidiary of NiSource called NIPSCO, which most of you would probably be familiar with since we serve the northern third of the state of Indiana, and moved over after a couple of years to the gas side, doing very similar work, training compliance work for the gas controllers group, which is really the folks that sit in a control room, monitor and control the gas pipeline system for NIPSCO. After being in that role for a while, I moved into a lead role doing the same work, helping others, mentoring others, and then moved into a manager role, taking not just the training, support, compliance stuff, but also on real-time operations and being over the actual controller group themselves, which is a 365, 24/7 role. Most recently, as Karen alluded to, I've branched off a little bit. I'm still a manager for NiSource, still in gas control, but I no longer am over the real-time group in NIPSCO, but I am over the support training compliance group for all of gas control for all of NiSource. So that is 6 different states that we cover, and that's Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland. 2 things you should probably know about me tonight. One, like I said, I like to hear my own voice. So get your canes ready to pull me off the stage as we're getting close. Give me some time warnings, please. And the other is I tend to yawn a lot when I'm speaking. And so please forgive me. I'm not tired. I'm not disengaged. I'm not getting enough oxygen to my brain because I don't stop to breathe enough. So if I yawn, please bear with me. I apologize in advance. So what's the purpose of the presentation I'm providing tonight? Again, really is to provide an overview on operational projects and utilities. Again, focused really on the gas side of the utility experience. And it really is a high level overview. We'll touch many different topics, but really just scratch the surface. I want to share my experience working in the industry because that's where I think I can bring value to the discussion. It's not just what I've learned and read, but it's also the things that I've gone through and seen. And then I would like to connect a lot of these examples, these practical examples, to project management framework and concepts. And again, I do this at a very high level, but it just shows you that these things are real and you can make those connections. So what I'm not trying to do in this presentation is prep you for taking the PMP exam. I'm not trying to prep you to go into the utility industry, though if something interests you, that's wonderful. And we're always looking for great talent. But that's not the point. The point is really, again, to connect some practical examples of real world problems and how the project management framework can really kind of be applied in some ways. First thing I'd like to do is kind of start off with a little bit of a survey or poll. So if you wouldn't mind joining me, go to slido.com and enter the number you see at the bottom left of the slide, or you can scan the QR code. We're going to have a few of these questions peppered throughout the presentation, I think 3 total. And the first question here, you can only respond to once, so make sure it's a good one. But if you were to pick just one topic to be on every project discussion agenda, what would you choose? And as they come in, we'll see the results and kind of start talking about it a little bit. Yeah, communication is key. I mean, if we don't include communication with all the stakeholders that are involved, and even some that we don't know should be involved, we can lose sight of a lot of things very quickly. Risk. Yeah, risk is huge. Risk management. Communication team. So we're seeing some themes here pop in. I know not everybody participating, may have the ability to jump into this, so I'll give it another minute or so. Timelines. Yep. So schedule is one I was expecting to see on here somewhere. So, I would, if I were to answer this question, it would be risk. I love risk. I think everything we do in life is based on risk. It's risk of reward and risk of consequence. And so risk can throw off your project. You can be off based on cost. You could be off based on schedule. Those things can be adjusted. Of course, you can identify and mitigate or manage risk so that it doesn't throw you off. That's the whole point of risk management. But if you don't do a good job identifying and preparing responses to and responding to risk, it can destroy your project. So to me, it's one of those things that needs to be brought up all the time. New risks continue to pop up and impact virtually every other part or process of project management. So that's just my thought. But yeah, all of these have a place at the table. Security and privacy, absolutely. And that, to me, involves risk as well. So thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. So stepping into the regulated environment space here, just kind of setting the stage for the rest of the presentation. Utilities provide a base product and service. And something I think is important to mention here, let's talk about natural gas, for example. A utility company that produces or that transports natural gas to customers, they do just that. There's a lot of different companies and key experts along the way, from the wellhead where they get gas all the way to the burner tip delivery. And there's, like I said, there's lots of stuff in between in storage, transmission, compression. And so there's lots of pieces of this complex system to think about. But one thing that I find a lot of people don't know is that if you're purchasing your gas, if you're paying, like NIPSCO, for example, you pay the NIPSCO bill, the gas that you're buying has a market cost to it. It's based on economics, supply and demand. And the company doesn't make money off of the gas itself. So whatever the company is paying to get that gas, you as a customer pay. So if you pay $3 a decatherm for example, that means the company paid $3 a decatherm to get that gas. Where the companies make their money is really in the service that's provided and the infrastructure that they have built and maintained. So that would be the pipeline infrastructure that's in the ground, all of the equipment. So you get charged, if you look at your bill, for delivery and transportation and storage. Those are the things that you're really charged for, where the company is making a return so that we can invest into the company again and also make a return for the shareholders. So we talked about that complex infrastructure, the pipeline that's in the ground. Obviously, we can't have many different customers competing with each other, companies rather, competing with each other for their customer base in the same area. There's only so much room in the ground for pipe, and it's intrusive on land. It could be very costly. It could impact environment. It could impact roadways and houses and industry. So basically, the pipe that's in the ground is the pipe that's used to transport gas to all customers, regardless of what company is delivering that service. So it's much like, your cable. You only got one cable line coming to your house, and there's a cable infrastructure or a phone infrastructure out there. Pipelines, electric lines, they all work the same way. So there's one set of infrastructure. So there needs to be protection so that companies don't abuse this as a monopoly and charge customers whatever they want. So there is this regulated utility environment for that delivery. However, the market itself for the commodity, the natural gas in this case, is deregulated and again follows economic supply and demand in regards to pricing, which is why you may see your pricing fluctuate based on the gas price. But again, you're paying that gas price through. Throughout all of this, there's many different sets of rules to follow. There are tariffs or rules around the services and costs and prices that are charged. There are rules on how the pipeline is installed, how it is maintained, how it is repaired, rules that have to be followed from an operations perspective. How do we flow gas? Where do we flow it from? It's a pretty complex environment, and there's lots to think about here. So, kind of talking about those difficult, complex concepts, they act as drivers for projects that are selected in the space. And what I want to do now is really cover a few of those categories that I think are key for operations. I'm going to put the operations hat on because projects can be selected in this industry in a variety of different departments. But my background is really in operations safety and the compliance piece as it relates to operations. So one of these categories of risk or drivers rather for project selection is really regulation, new regulation changes, or regulation that's in effect for companies that are building new things. So that new regulation is driven primarily from safety. Things have occurred in the past that have led to some regulation being created and companies having to follow those things. What I'd like to do is just kind of cover a couple of examples. One specifically very close to me, which is the control room management rule. And both of the rules I'd like to cover have been instated within the last 12 years-ish, and both instated by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA. If you're really interested, feel free to go to the code for control room management. It's 49 CFR 192.631. Super interesting read. I'm sure you'll love it. It won't put you to sleep at all. No, to be honest with you, it's actually a relatively short code, and there's a lot baked into it. And there's a lot of interpretation that has happened with code, as anyone who's dealt with regulatory or legal has probably had some experience with. And that interpretation can be different per company, per auditor, per auditing body. So there's a lot that goes into that. But there are some more details that were submitted by PHMSA to the public, so to speak, around FAQs and some audit guidance that go into a little bit more detail on what the expectations are, though they're not technically auditable. If an auditor asks you a question about it, it's probably good to have a good answer for it. So this rule itself really focuses on control room operations for pipelines. And it went into effect because of several incidents in the pipeline industry that have occurred, and in fact was escalated based on one particular event that I'll talk about on the next slide. And this focus for control room operations, it really has many different categories that it tackles, and mostly, again, it's based on risk, people, information, processes, making sure that the folks that we have doing control work have enough rest in between their shifts, making sure that they don't work more than a certain number of hours in a 7-day period, ensuring that they have enough training and education for fatigue mitigation, as well as how to do their jobs. Do they know what systems to use, how to use them? How do the pipelines operate? What do they need to do in response to an abnormal condition? That's all laid out in the rule, that it must be there as an infrastructure for the control room. Do the controllers have enough information coming into them? Can they make sense of that information? Can they make decisions based on that information? In many cases, it starts as data and the controller turns it into information and then drives decisions based on their own situational awareness, experience, and training. But we have to make sure that they're getting the appropriate things and noise is blocked out so that they can focus on the important things that come into the control room. Processes as well, change management. When something, management of change. The rule states change management, and I've heard many different dialogues around the differences between management of change and change management. But what I really want to get at here is that there's a process in this rule that has to be followed around when changes are planned or executed, that controllers or control rooms have to not only be privy and a part of that, but also have to have their own processes, their tail off processes mapped out and completed successfully, effectively, and in a timely manner. And so a lot of these things didn't exist prior to the rule coming into existence. And you think these all sound like great practices, but if people weren't held accountable to following them, they cost money, they cost people. There's, you have to have processes built, you have to have systems there. Naturally, some companies aren't going to have them because they don't have to. And they've led to some safety incidents, and these rules come into play for good reasons. But when they do come into play, there's lots of big projects that have to go underway to be within compliance. So the other one I wanted to mention, which I won't go into as much detail, is around the PHMSA mega rule. And this is a newer one that came out. And this one, instead of focusing on control room and people, is really focused on pipe and equipment. One of the big categories here in this rule is the verification of pipe materials and verifying the limitations of that pipe material and anything in the pipeline stream. So you'd think that records exist for everything out on a pipeline, and it's just not the case. There's a lot of assumptions made based on history, and we're going back now and verifying that those things are actually true. Repair for different consequence areas and identification of leaks. What a consequence area is, it's really a way of classifying the risk of a pipeline incident. So if a pipeline were to rupture in a major city like Chicago versus a pipeline rupturing in a farm field in Royal Center, Indiana, very different circumstances and events occur after the fact, different impacts, both not good, but more people, more property gets damaged in a higher consequence area. So it's important to have those different classifications because the way the pipe is repaired and maintained is different. And then finally, PHMSA gave themselves the authority to issue emergency orders, which you'd think would be in place prior to this, but it wasn't. So now they have that authority with the mega rule. And that's
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Karen. Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Within this, is there any rule that when a particular product reaches a certain age that you automatically have to replace it? Like in my simple buying, I'm just thinking like a laptop, it reaches a certain age and our company automatically sends us a new one. Or do you just have to demonstrate that things are in good working order, and it's only when something gets to the point that it's, so degraded that then you have to make a repair to it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Most things don't have a time frame on life where it has to be replaced. That's where the maintenance programs come into play. Validation that the equipment is still safe to operate, still operating the way that you expect it to, and hasn't degraded, as you said. And if it has, then it becomes a question of, can we do a repair, or does it have to be a replacement? So no, I don't think there's a fast and steady rule on this pipe is X amount of years old and must be replaced now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So, what I really wanted to do here was connect the PMBOK enterprise and environmental factors to these, because these are project drivers. These are things that can kick off projects for companies, whether they want them to or not. And this particular EEF is an external EEF, and it's related to the one that's around government and industry standards. So as I already mentioned, many events have already occurred, and I'm sure that that you've heard about them, and continue to occur as pipelines get older. Fortunately, we've got a lot more eyes on these things, and people are paying more attention, I think, than ever, but we'll get into that in a moment. So there have been incidents in liquid and gas pipelines, obviously severe impacts here: fire, explosion, release of the actual commodity, the gas, the liquid, and whether it's into the air or into the environment, damage to facilities and property, service loss. You may not think about that one right away, but if there's a big pipeline rupture, then you don't have that service at that point in time, and depending on the time of year could make a big difference. If it's negative 15 degrees out, we don't want to lose service of natural gas to residents downstream of that, because people can get hurt or die from that as well. And as we've seen with the recent Colonial pipeline shutdown, even though there wasn't like a rupture or anything, it was just a shutdown, people start to panic and buy up gas like crazy because it's thinking people are going to have a low supply. So there's impacts here, and of course the worst possible would be injury and fatality. A couple of examples here, both from 2010. One was in San Bruno, California. And the company was Pacific Gas and Electric, or PG&E, and they had a pipe rupture, and it was a large pipe, large diameter pipe. I believe it was 30 inches, maybe 36, under many pounds of pressure. I think it was 350 pounds or close to 400 pounds, which you may not seem like a lot compared to some of the other things that you may have heard. But think about this massive pipe that is miles and miles long under that type of pressure. It's just a tremendous amount of gas. And they had a rupture that did ignite, did explode, and caused a lot of damage to lives and the community. We lost a lot of homes, lost a lot of people. And I think it was somewhere around 80 homes were damaged, maybe 30 were destroyed, and I think 8 people died from it and many others were injured. And you'd think, hey, this thing explodes. Imagine being there and you feel this huge vibration. If you're close, you could feel heat. You hear it. It's loud, and you're disoriented. You think, hey, fireball. At least we got through it. And unfortunately, if you're close to the blast, that's terrible. But you know what? That's not the case. This is a natural gas pipeline, and that gas supplied for a while. They weren't able to shut that pipeline down for about 90 minutes. So you've got a raging fireball that's blowing fire taller than houses for an hour and a half before it gets shut down. So scary stuff can happen, but unfortunately, sometimes it happens and creates good paths for us to make corrections and not have those things happen again. Lessons learned, right? And then the other incident is Marshall, Michigan. Again, same year, Enbridge Pipeline. It was not a natural gas company. They were moving liquids, and they had a rupture in the pipe. The control room recognized an anomaly, and there was an engineer in the control room that told them that anomaly was not an anomaly, that it was to be expected to see that kind of drop in pressure. And they asked the controller to go ahead and pump it again. And they did that a couple of times, and they pumped that liquid into a ruptured pipe, which outpoured it into the environment. And I think it was right around 800,000 extra gallons of liquid was pumped out because of those erroneous actions taken. So, these rules, again, come into play for a reason, but they're big projects that companies have to undergo. What I'd like to do is just take a couple of minutes to look at a video on San Bruno so you can kind of see some of the impact here. And if I could get a thumbs up once I start it, make sure the audio is going for everybody.
Out of Northern California, a giant fireball there last night, just around dinner time. Dozens of homes destroyed after a huge explosion last night. It was apparently caused by a broken gas line. It happened in a San Francisco suburb very close to San Francisco International Airport. Priya David Clemens is at the scene in San Bruno this morning with the latest. Priya, good morning.
Erica, good morning to you. We're right at the edge of where the fire stopped. I want you to take a look at this devastation behind me. You're going to see burned out cars, the firefighters still working to make sure all the smoldering flames are out completely. We're seeing little pockets of flames still pop up here and there. See, this home has been completely flattened. This is a scene that has been repeated dozens of times throughout this neighborhood. Parts of San Bruno, California were turned into a raging inferno around dinner time Thursday evening. Flames roared some 60 feet into the air as block after block in this residential neighborhood, about 5 miles from San Francisco's airport, were engulfed. Witnesses reported hearing and feeling a large explosion, leading to early speculation that a plane may have gone down.
It sounded like a jet, almost like just a giant roar, and then the biggest boom I've ever heard in my life.
But it was a high-pressure natural gas line that ruptured, caused the explosion, and then fueled the spectacular blaze. The local utility company, Pacific Gas.
I'll go ahead and stop it there. I think you probably get the point. Again, kind of imagine this perpetual flamethrower for a 90-minute period in your neighborhood and trying to firefight that. Kind of open it up for a second here. Any comments anybody has or any additional questions as we're going?
Out of Northern California.
Okay, I'll continue on then. So moving into some of the other categories for project drivers, people is a big one. Administration of our country, who's running the country right now? What's the political climate? And that makes a big difference. Is coal in? Is coal out? What's natural gas? Where's that on the docket? How green are we getting? How green do we want to be? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it biogas? It plays a big role in what direction utility companies, energy companies go and what projects they select. Workforce turnover, that's a pretty big one, actually, in regards to some of the struggles that we've seen. We had people in the industry for 40 plus years, and over the last 10 years or so, and within the next few years, we're going to have most, if not all of that expert knowledge and experience retire from the industry. And they know these systems. They know not just the physics and operations behind it, but they know the specifics behind their systems. And that's important. These each act very different from each other based on the configuration, the customer modeling, and how the supply is coming in. So, losing that is obviously huge. And we're getting new talented people in, and that's great, but it's hard to transfer that kind of knowledge in a short period of time. Social influence on environmental, impacts. It's kind of is in line with administration a little bit, but I think we're in the information age, but we're pretty close to the misinformation age if we're not already there. We get so much streaming from many different social media sources and different social circles that these things are obviously very impactful in a very short period of time, in real time, essentially. People are influenced pretty heavily on what's put out there, and good and bad. I think looking at it objectively, green is obviously a great way to go, but I don't think we can get there in a day. We've got a strong infrastructure that needs to be shifted over time. So those social influences, again, make a difference. And then there's a cultural shift in the industry as well. Safety has never been number two. Safety is always top priority, but the way that we think about safety, I think, is shifting. And it's always been, you see something, say something. It's always follow the rules, follow PPE protocols, be the guard for everyone around you. You want to go home the same way that you went to work. Those sorts of things have always been in play, but the organizations are changing the model of thought too. And some have really accepted this safety management system model, which is not a technology, not a tool, but again, a way of operating, a method or a mode of operation. And it really focuses on identifying risk and managing risk that you've identified, and making sure that you've got good procedures, plans, and policies in place, and that they're followed and continuously improved upon. There's a lot more to it, but in a nutshell, those are some big core items in a safety management system, and that's changing some of the projects that are selected from those organizations as well. So more of the EEFs, and there's a mixture of internal and external here. We've got social and cultural influences and issues, organizational culture, structure, governance, resource availability, and employee capability, all kind of wrapped up in here under the people category. And then finally, the last category I wanted to cover on project drivers is really around facilities. We've got aging pipelines and equipment. So Karen, kind of going back to your question, we've got pipe that's been in the ground for 40, 50, 60 plus years. And, there's been this kind of mode of operation, a status quo, if you will, for a long time, because pipe was placed in that long ago, and the infrastructure was kind of built around the same time, and we just have to maintain it. Well, now we're getting to the point where there's got to be a lot of replacement. There's maybe we're finding things that were installed maybe either improperly, or we found better ways to do it. There's changes in technology and how we can operate, how we can what pieces of equipment, valves, regulators, meters, pipes themselves, how we protect the pipe systems like that have changed, that require us to go in and make some changes to our actual infrastructure. There's also record management issues. I kind of hinted to this earlier, but we've got things that are really old. Nothing was digitized, right? I mean, everything was paper. So some of that stuff was lost. There's some instances where companies don't know what they have in the ground or where it is. And the only way to find it is to kind of, take some educated guesses and, dig around to find some of that equipment, emergency valves and so forth. I wouldn't say that that's the vast majority. I don't want people to panic, but those things exist, and projects are selected based on that. Hey, we have this map that has this valve. Nobody can find it. What if we had an instance where we had to operate it? Well, now we have to determine if we want to go in and install a different valve, which probably would be wise, but it costs money, and we've got other projects that are prioritized up against it. So, and then population expansion, land rights. How do we deal with an ever-growing infrastructure need as more businesses and residences are built? It's difficult to find the infrastructure layout to go around these things or through these things under the ground with new pipelines to feed these customers. And it becomes more costly as well. There's roads we have to worry about, bodies of water, and then again, buildings. But then if you're building in a highly populated area or digging, it's going to cost more than if you're digging in a rural area. So a lot of these things come into play and really fall in line with the EEF of infrastructure. So these 4 things, the bottom, regulation change, incidents in the industry, people, social position or society position on energy, changes in equipment needs. What's the linkage? I've said it several times in the presentation, and it's risk. I mean, it's all risk-based to me. That's what connects these things. That's what connects all the project drivers, in my opinion, for operations, at least, again, in the organization, in the industry itself. So risk drives project selection, right? We take these risks, we put them in a risk register on an organizational level, and then prioritize these risks so that we know what to attack first. What projects can we do? Because unfortunately, resources are finite. We can't just spend anything we want, and we don't have the people to do the work. We don't have, like you said, the funds. We can't get the cost recovered quickly. It has to be cost recoverable. So we have to prioritize these things and attack them in some organized manner, and ensure that we are continuing to deliver safe and reliable service to our customers at the most cost-effective rate that we can. And that cost recoverability, there's a limit on how much a company can earn based on the payments that customers give. And that's approved in the tariff, and they have to go through regulatory to get those things approved. And you might see, in the next few years, because of the increase in projects on infrastructure and infrastructure upgrades, I would anticipate gas prices or gas bills probably to go up across the nation, really, because we're going to have more projects that go in, and companies have to recover those things that they've never had to do in the past, because it's been more about maintenance than it has been about replacement and system changes. So these projects that are prioritized and have to be cost recoverable also involve a wide audience. I mean, it's very complex. This isn't simple stuff. Putting pipe in the ground sounds very simple, but you've got to involve contractors, operations and maintenance, compliance, regulatory, legal, risk management folks, system planning, again, thinking about growth. Where are we going in 5 to 10 years? Yeah, that project makes sense right now and against the lens of the last 50 years, but we know there's going to be some economic growth in that area. So maybe we need to do something a little bit different in capacity. There's just and this is just a really small snippet, right? But so many different folks have to be involved in virtually any project that involves changing the infrastructure or system configuration of a pipeline. How do we engage those folks? How do we get them involved? Again, they're complex, long-reaching, detailed. In my experience in the industry, I've seen a lot of strong to weak matrix environments for project management. Oftentimes there's a project management office with many good resources to lean on, organizational structure, documents, processes. However, it's never, the project manager doesn't really have any direct reports, right? They're still having to work with a matrix environment, pulling people in from different expert areas. And there are many different expert groups that these folks have to pull from. And anybody ever work with anybody who's difficult on change? I doubt it. Most people love change. Yeah. So, I mean, some folks do embrace it. Some folks champion it. And some folks vehemently oppose it or against it, right? We get those folks in there. And usually it's not like one person's gung-ho all the time. It's when they have buy-in. It's when they understand what is occurring and they believe in the value. And so, looking at the next box here, the green one in the bottom, selling value versus effort. It's one of our jobs as a project manager, project leader, or anybody inside of a project. We have to ensure that we drive the vision and ensure people understand the why. It's not just, hey, look, you have to do this because, right? I get it. Regulation happened. Now we have to jump, right? We have to do something. But why? Even beyond that, yeah, okay, that's the reason we're doing a project right now. But what value does it provide us? What value does it provide our customers? And really explaining that and ensuring people have a full understanding. And it's also our job to be on the other side of that coin, advocates for change, making sure that we're trying to understand the why. We're being inquisitive, asking the questions so we can give our buy-in. And there are several ways that I've seen folks engage. And you know what? None of this is earth-shattering, folks. Sorry, I hope that you weren't thinking I was going to come in and give you the big aha. This is how I do it. But kickoff meetings are a must. I mean, it really sets the stage. It gets people focused together on the main objectives, what we're driving to do, and solicits feedback in a very short period of time, so you know that you're heading the right direction right off the get. And then subject matter expert workshops are very helpful. It kind of prevents people from being death by meetinged and having to be in a bunch of meetings that they don't have to be in. It's focused in a specific area. And also, really small groups work very well so that you stay away from groupthink. I find that there's a few strong individuals that usually take over the conversation. And it's not that the folks that aren't strong. It's just maybe they're not as outspoken as some of the other folks. And so it's good to kind of piece people apart from each other to be able to elicit that information from them. Lots of email. I mean, it's probably common for everybody. Emails go back and forth like crazy, get information out and in from an elicitation perspective. I've seen some surveys go through email or SurveyMonkey as well to collect some information, and then bring that to a subject matter expert workshop or even the kickoff to have some topics at the kickoff. So those are some of the things that we've done to engage our folks and ensure that everybody's at least involved. And one of the more important things too that I didn't put it on the slide is ensuring that you have the right stakeholders to begin with. And that's difficult as a project manager that is over many different expert groups in a project that's complex, long reaching and detailed. You got to spend some time figuring out who the players are and who you need to have involved from both an influence perspective as well as from a getting things done perspective. And it just takes people skills. Like Karen said, it's about understanding people, having some emotional intelligence, caring about people, and understanding what their needs are so that you can kind of scratch each other's backs a little bit. All right, break time, for me at least. Another question for you in Slido. And how am I doing on time? Yeah, I have 5 minutes left, so I'll run through it a little fast. But if you wouldn't mind, head back over here. What does methane smell like? This is just a fun question. Does it smell like gasoline, sulfur, rotten eggs, nothing, or rotten meat? Let's see what folks think. I think I had 7 or 8 responses before. I'll wait till we get about there. All right, looks like I've got 9 responses. That's probably pretty good. You can feel free to put it in there if you want, but you're going to get the answer here. It actually smells like nothing. So it's a tough answer because you can make the argument with me. If I was instructing a class here that, hey, wait a minute, it smells like when I have a gas leak, it smells like sulfur or rotten eggs. But no, natural gas smells like sulfur, rotten eggs. Methane has no aroma. In fact, natural gas naturally doesn't have any odor to it. That odor is actually added to the gas so that you can smell it if it was leaking. So the reason I went through this question, and a lot of people don't know that, is because I'm going to talk about it a little bit here on this slide. So let's talk about that specific example of gas control. And I'll move through this a little bit quickly, but NIPSCO specifically, northern third of Indiana, not a very large company, right? When you talk about the country and natural gas supply. However, just NIPSCO has 17,000 miles of pipe, approximately. That's if you were to stop the equator of the earth and line a pipe end to end around the circumference of the earth, that would reach about 70% of the circumference of the earth, just NIPSCO. So think about all the pipe that's in the ground with all the different companies, not just gas, anything that's in the ground. There's lots of stuff underneath us. We at NIPSCO interconnect with 7 major transmission pipelines that come across our territory. And these pipelines have gas supply from Texas, Louisiana, coming in from Michigan, down from Canada, over from the east where the new shale gas has been found, and coming back that way. So lots of different interconnects. We're sort of at this Midwest hub in this really cool spot to have that particular capability. Tons of pressure systems interconnected. I wish I could get detailed on that, but I just can't in this presentation. There's a lot of field data out there that's integrated into a supervisory control and data acquisition system. It's SCADA. I'm going to call it SCADA from now on. And this is a computer system in the control room that allows the controllers to see and react to a variety of instances of data. And so what does a controller do in the control room? What does gas control do? Well, we monitor key data points. So the pressure in the pipe, the odorant of the gas. And we actually have to put in a compound called mercaptan into the gas to give it the odorant that you smell. Now, if we put too little in, you won't be able to detect it on a leak. If we put too much in, number one, we're spending too much money on something unnecessarily. Number two, it's a very strong smelling substance and can cause false leak smells. And then we're dispatching people to things that aren't actually leaking when they could be focused on areas that really could be safety related. So there's a window of trying to think of a rate that has to be injected into the natural gas with this mercaptan as it's flowing before it gets down to customer level. And we monitor that in gas control. We monitor the gas control, the gas flow rates. You know, how fast is the gas moving? How much are we moving? Gas quality, how much sulfur is in this gas? How much moisture is in this gas? Because those things can impact equipment, appliances downstream. It could impact the pipe itself, you know, cause internal corrosion. So we have to monitor all these things. And then gas control also deals with supply management. Every single day, gas control has to forecast how much gas every day, how much gas every customer, about 830,000 customers, would use in NIPSCO land. And then we have to procure that gas, get it into our system and deliver it, and then manage any imbalance from that forecast. And again, it's on a daily basis. So there's a lot there to that. So this remote data helps, right? Imagine not having any of that. You got 17,000 miles of pipe, no remote data. That means you got to have boots on the ground to go check gauges, to go check charts, to go check to see if things are odorizing. Obviously very complicated and expensive. So obviously remote data is going to help us being able to direct the workforce where we need to based on that data point. However, there's still risk involved, right? New risks involved with this. And so this image here, I took from reverecontrol.com, but it's a basic layout of how SCADA gets its information, how gas control gets its data. So we start at the bottom level with the instrument inputs with either a transducer moving into a transmitter. It's basically taking a measurement of one of those things that we measure, transmitting it to an RTU. You see the RTU there. An RTU stands for remote terminal unit. This is a computer in the field that collects the data, stores the data, does some calculations with the data. And then, you know, that's great. That's all at one site. So we've got the data. Now, how do we get it into gas control, which is in one spot? Well, we have to transfer it through some kind of communication, radio, cellular, satellite, lease line. I mean, so many different potential methods, but we have to use one of them to get it into the SCADA terminal or SCADA host servers. Then once you have it there, you've got a user that controls and adjusts the system based on the data, and then also responds to abnormal conditions and alarms and events that occur. And so any path along this map fails, you've lost something, maybe all of it. If we lose the instrument at the bottom level, then yeah, we lost that particular point of data. If you lose the RTU, then you lose that site. If you lose the communication method, you lose all sites that are related to that communication method. If you lose SCADA, everything's gone. So there are certain risks here that you have to think about that get added that have to be maintained and monitored. And think about the projects here, all the people, all the components that have to be put together to just put these things in and get them to communicate to a central location. It's not light work. And yeah, we could see even cyber risks, right? With Calumet, we just talked about on the SCADA side. If we get hacked in any of these areas, then what? You know, can somebody control our system? So some things to think about. Risk management, there's a focus on risk identification for projects, really melding the safety management system and project management ideals together. So I talked about what the SMS culture or operating mode is, and everybody here is probably familiar with PM concepts to some degree. And then we look at the project risk registers, compare them to organizational risk registers, and use those together in tandem to figure out what our biggest risks are and how to tackle them. And then some of the common project risks I've seen, which probably won't be a big surprise: safety, compliance, cost, especially since we have a limited ability to recover those costs, the schedule and resource slippage, contractors not being available when we need them, design and rework, that's huge. Measure once, cut, or measure once, cut, measure twice, cut once. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it wrong every time, but design is super important. We have to make sure we put the amount of planning that's appropriate for the project in, so that we don't have to redo it. It's super expensive. It can impact operations, impact supply to customers. So that's huge. And I talked about management of change already. Some of the PMBOK tools and techniques that I've seen used in the company, everything risk management. In the PMBOK framework, yes, yep. And RACI charts, absolutely. If you're not familiar with those, it really helps define who's responsible, accountable for getting work done, who you need to consult, and who you need to inform along the way. It seems like such a terrible exercise when you're doing it, but when you're done with it, it's really helpful. And then brainstorming is also really great. And I wanted to mention something with brainstorming here that I found in my experience. It's very easy to make brainstorming ineffective by not allowing people to talk. So just something to throw out there. If you have a brainstorming session, sometimes people throw up some duds. They do, okay? It happens. Sometimes they throw up duds and you end up being wrong and it wasn't a dud. That happens too. But no matter what, let people throw it up there. Don't discount anything, because the worst thing you could do is stifle the creativity and stifle somebody's desire to speak up. So just something I wanted to mention. One last question in Slido. This one's got multiple answers. What tools or techniques have you found useful in risk management? And I swear, folks, we're almost there. And this one, like I said, you can enter more than one if you'd like. Yeah, brainstorming. Like I said, that's one I see all the time. Risk radar. That's not one I've heard of, so I'm gonna have to look into that. Thanks for sharing. Yep, identifying risks for sure. When a risk may be realized. Yeah, absolutely. That's key. I mean, because you need to know where it's going to be at in your schedule and when it's past you too, when you don't have to think about it anymore. And how a risk is recognized or realized too, right? What's the trigger? How do we know this occurred? No, thank you. Appreciate the responses. I know you might be typing, but for the sense of time here, I'll keep moving. So, you know, I put this in kind of jokingly, but who cares? Who cares about what I'm talking about? I mean, this isn't project management solely. You know, it's specific to an industry. Yeah, I get that. But what you really can recognize is that you got the same framework that you can use for different challenges. Different industries, different companies can think about things in the same way and use the same tools and techniques. And that's the point of the PMBOK, right? It's the fact that it's a framework that could be applied in many different areas. And you can pick and choose which parts of the framework work best for you. Also, you need to understand others' objectives and constraints. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's up to us to ask the questions, to be inquisitive, to be positive forces, to try to help and push back when we need to. I'm not saying, you know, be a yes person, you know, push back when you think something doesn't make sense. But let's have a positive attitude about it and help others get there. Risk is critical. If you can get anything out of this, risk helps drive projects, helps make projects, helps break projects. So always keep that in mind. And it helps to keep risk in mind, obviously, for project selection as well as execution and every single area in project management. And you may or may not have choices along the way, right? I mean, we don't always get to pick the projects we work on. It'd be great if we did, but we don't. There's a little quote at the bottom. It's kind of dating myself here, a band, Depeche Mode. And it's not really a quote from them, but it's pretty close. I just tweaked it a little bit. What you take won't kill you, but careful what you're given. And what I mean by this, and the relevance here, is when we get to pick something, we have the buy-in. We care. We want it. When we're given something, we're a little more wary, right? We don't know if we agree with it. We don't know if we want it. We didn't select it, therefore it's not a great idea. Sometimes we have that mentality, even if it's in the back of our minds. And I think that's natural, but I think we need to get over that and push ourselves to try to understand the positions that are out there. And then just, real quick, last slide, I think it's the last slide, just reconnecting these things. PMI framework, it works. It ensures you don't miss thoughtful processes. You can find out what works for you, continue to use them, and then you can build on your organizational lessons and tools over time so that you can share them with others. And you can engage others based on what's provided to you in the framework. Who should be included, what level, how do you sell the value, why should you sell the value, and how do you get the most effort out of folks, or the least amount of effort to get your work done, but the most effort that they can give for what you need. And then providing the successful path for allowing for creativity, allow them to have some buy-in, allow them to take some ownership, but provide them with what the roadmap looks like. Documentation is key. Again, learning from your history, sharing with other people so you can grow and apply it. Like I said, just apply the framework. And if you don't want to apply the whole thing, that's fine, but at least check against it. Go through it several times until you're very familiar with it. Understand what is in there, what you have at your disposal. Ask the questions, would this work in this case? In some cases, the answer is no, but you asked. It was there. You asked, you can move past it and move into something that would work. That is it for me. I hope you found this informative, engaging, something. Any questions for me or for anybody, I guess, at this point?
Adam, this is Mike Kraus from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Hello. I want to first of all say thank you. This was a great presentation. You brought up a lot of things that I never really thought about, right? I go to the kitchen sink, I turn on the water, it shows up. I get my hot water from my gas hot water heater. Everything just works, but I never really think about everything it takes to bring it to my home. So thank you for doing this tonight.
You're welcome.
The Colonial pipeline, the window into the details of that hack seemed to be very opaque. And I just read today that Colonial paid a $4.4 million ransom for that hack. A couple months ago, we had a water system in Florida that was hacked. Can you give us some sense of the risk that we have in this country around our utility systems and whether or not they are safe and protecting us or not?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'll tell you, it's a topic that is constantly gaining speed in the industry. So, I could say Department of Homeland Security has been involved very heavily with a lot of organizations to determine gaps, to do some analysis or audit on IT infrastructure and security to help determine where we can fill gaps, what best practices are. And I think it's a great question to ask. We're asking it too. And there are a lot of systems in place that already separate network infrastructure and have a lot of different protection. And I can't go into the details on IT because frankly, that's just not my background. But I know that there are a lot of protective systems. I work with very capable people who give me some assurances and show me some things that, again, I can't repeat. But yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of safety practices in place. Cybersecurity will always be a risk. It's who has the ability to outsmart who at the time. The one good thing I'll say is, or maybe it's not a good thing, it's just a fact. From gas pipeline perspective, there's a huge variety on what is controllable from a remote perspective. So, I can say that one gas control facility in any of you pick a company, it doesn't matter. They may see a lot of data points, but oftentimes in order to respond, there's got to be a field dispatch. You got to be on site. You have to be there turning a wrench to make a change. And that's not in all cases. There are some things that are controllable. However, there's also protective physical equipment, mechanical equipment in the field that protect from too much pressure or too little pressure on either side. So even if somebody's taking control of something remotely, you got devices out there that do protect from going over or under certain values and causing risk harm.
Thank you for that. You make me feel a little better,
Good.
at least for gas.
Yeah, I can't speak for every industry, but I know that it's a hot topic for anything that has a remote operations with sort of a Department of Transportation purview. So I would say if there are companies out there with gaps, hopefully they'll be recognized and rectified soon, very quickly, because cybersecurity is huge. Any other questions or comments, or anybody want to throw some rotten vegetables at me?
Was the quote from Depeche Mode from Dream On?
Yes, yes, it is.
Wonderful. I love the quote. I really appreciated the risk management section. I think that adds a lot. As a practitioner, risk is always my number one go-to. I actually look to risk management and mitigating risks more than schedule and cost on most of the time. If at all, you know, it's our job to try to give leading indicators where we can, and which is why I always focus on risks. And I really appreciated the section that you had on risk management.
Thank you. Well, if I don't have any other questions, thank you so much for listening to me. I know I went a little bit over time, but not as much as I thought I did. So appreciate it. And I'm glad to be a part of the chapter. You should see me more regularly. And I did, by the way, I meant to say the last two presenters I saw were both outstanding. And I was so nervous walking into this because I can't hold a candle to those types of presenters. So thanks for having me.
Outstanding. Thank you, Adam. Okay. As a wrap up for our meeting tonight, we have 3 items up for raffle. Number 1, it's a Strength Finder 2.0, a risk assessment framework, successfully navigating uncertainty. And lastly, supporting your local merchants through COVID. So we're going to make these available, and the best way that we can make these available, pardon me, let me do this. Wait for it. Wait for it. Changing things here. And here we go. It's the magic wheel time, folks. I know you've been waiting for it. Our first winner, Leslie Curry. Congratulations. You have won Strengths Finders 2.0, an excellent book for understanding individual leadership capabilities. Woohoo! Okay, let's spin the wheel again. Let's go for risk assessment. Our next winner is Shirley Neuenschwander from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Come on down. You had just won Risk Assessment Framework, successfully navigating uncertainty. Okay, folks, hold your breath. Time for the $25 gift card. And our winner is Hillary Evans. Congratulations, Hillary. Okay, we would like you to do, just because we may not be sure we have everyone's address, please contact myself, president at PMI-Calumet.org, or VP-development at PMI-Calumet.org. And between Karen and I, we will make sure you get these gifts as soon as you can. So if there's any other questions, last minute. I do have one question. Grace Vardaman, are you out there? Grace, can you go on? Can you go on the screen, please, if you're there, Gracie?
Okay. So far so good. I muted myself. I'm trying to start my video. Hold on one second.
Okay, great. Great. Folks, you're going to love this.
Oh, okay. Here we go. I think, yes, there we go. Yay!
I have an announcement. Grace Vardaman is now a disciplined agile scrum master who just achieved her DASM certification with our friend Jonathan Lee just this last week or so. So
Oh,
congratulations,
great.
Grace.
Great.
Congratulations.
That's wonderful, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you. I've gotten a lot of responses via LinkedIn, and people from work are like, hey, can you share some of those tools? So to Adam's point, a lot of the things you touched on, they actually touch on DASM also, because they combine lean and agile methodologies together. So you were spot on. You did a great job today.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace, and congratulations. That's fantastic news. Well done.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, folks, this is going to be a wrap. We invite you again next month to join us for Neil Maxumble and his Be Agile presentation. Watch for the announcements coming out here in a few days. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you soon, and thank you for supporting the chapter. Have a great evening.
Enjoy your trip.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.